The habit changed after actually, let me back up. Have you ever tried to change a habit and just couldn't get through it? The more you worked at it, the less it seemed to move. Have you ever had an insight so clear that it felt undeniable and then noticed your life didn't change at all? I've had that happen more times than I'd actually like to admit. The clarity was real. It landed physically. It flashed behind the eyes, that light bulb moment, that soft drop in the chest. I wasn't journaling, processing, or trying to fix myself. I was just living my day when something about me became obvious. There's a quiet confidence that comes with it. I walked away thinking, all right, that was the thing. That was the missing piece. I've seen it now. And because it felt real, because it felt embodied in that instant, I assumed it had weight. I assumed it would carry forward into how I live. Then a few days pass, or a few hours, and I catch myself doing the exact same thing again. It would almost sneak back in a casual, almost polite way. And the weirdest part is that the insight is still there. It hasn't faded. I can feel it running in parallel. There's a part of me watching myself repeat the behavior and quietly saying, yeah, this is the pattern I saw. This is the thing I understood. That moment used to mess with me more than the behavior itself, because it creates this strange split. One side, there's clarity. The other hand, there's this habitual action that doesn't seem to care. And if you stay with that long enough, it starts to feel personal. Like maybe the insight wasn't deep enough, or maybe I didn't really get it in the first place. Or maybe I'm just resistant in some way I haven't uncovered yet. So I lived inside that loop for years, seeing clearly, trying to extract more insight to fix that gap, as if the next realization would finally have enough force behind it. At some point, I noticed something that changed the way I looked at the whole thing. The insight always arrived first, yet the behavior had already started. You see, the behavior was already in motion before the thought even showed up. And I started seeing this in very small moments, like reaching for my iPhone without deciding to. Or I would tighten my shoulders when a certain email came in, speeding up my speech slightly around certain people. None of those actions waited for permission. They weren't consulting my understanding. They were already responding to something the body had recognized. That's when it started to dawn on me that insight and behavior live in different layers of the system. Not in a hierarchy, just functionally. Insight belongs to consciousness. That's the part of you that can suddenly see things clearly. It connects the dots. It steps back and goes, oh, that's what's been happening. Insight shows up fast. One moment, one realization, and the picture makes complete sense. Now, behavior doesn't live there. Behavior lives in the body, in how you breathe, how tense you are, how quickly you react. See, the body isn't deciding what's true. It's responding to what it's learned that keeps you safe in the world. And that learning started long before you could explain anything. So, when your body tightens, rushes, freezes, or avoids, it isn't ignoring your insight. It's responding to a pattern that it already knows, a way the world has felt before. The pattern lives in sensation, not in thought. That's why you can understand something perfectly, yet you keep doing the same old thing. Insight happens in awareness. Behavior follows the signals the body already trusts. And those signals arrive before explanation ever got a turn. Once I saw that, I just couldn't ignore it. I began to notice how often I was asking insight to do a job it was never designed to do. See, insight can illuminate a pattern, yeah. It can reveal a truth, no problem. It can even reorganize how meaning is held. But it doesn't transmit safety. And behavior is organized around safety. Now, that word safety gets misunderstood. So let me explain what I mean. Safety isn't comfort. It isn't ease or pleasure. It's the body recognizing that the conditions it learned to survive within are no longer present in that same way. Until that recognition settles, the body keeps doing what it knows works. I saw this clearly one morning doing something painfully simple. I wasn't meditating, reflecting, or having one of those moments. I was just standing there doing something basic. No pressure, no deadline, nothing urgent. And yet my body was in a hurry. My hands were moving fast, breath was shallow, my jaw was clenched like I was late for something important. And then the insight came to me instantly. There's no reason to hurry. Nothing depends on this. My body didn't get the memo. The body didn't change. And that was the moment it really made sense. Insight had arrived, the signal hadn't. The body was still living inside a world where speed mattered, where readiness mattered, where staying slightly ahead of the moment felt absolutely necessary. That world might not have been real anymore, but it was still the one my nervous system was recognizing. And here's where the spiritual layer becomes unavoidable, whether we want it or not. The soul knows where you are. It's not confused. It's not behind. The body is the translator. It's been translating a certain field for a long time. Insight is consciousness catching up to the soul. Behavior shifts when the body receives permission to translate something new. Now, that permission doesn't come from understanding. It comes from lived repetition, from staying present long enough for a system to register a different baseline. And here's something else that I noticed when I stopped trying to force change through insight. The moments when behavior actually shifted were quiet. There was no announcement, no internal high five. I would only realize later that something didn't happen. The old reaction just didn't show up. The familiar tension didn't arrive. And even then, the noticing felt delayed, almost like the body made the change first and consciousness caught up afterwards. Now, that reversal is important, because that tells me I'd been watching the wrong place. We tend to track insight because it's visible. It has language. You can point to it. You can quote it. You can remember when it happened. Behavior change is harder to track because it often arrives as absence, less effort, less internal friction, and fewer negotiations. So at some point I stopped asking, how do I change this behavior, and started asking, what is my body still responding to as real? And that question really opened the door to creating change. I began noticing the environments, rhythms, and relational spaces, where my system stayed braced. Not emotionally, physically. Where my breath shortened, where my posture shifted, where my awareness narrowed. Those were the places still broadcasting the old signal. Insight didn't need to fix those places. Presence did. And then here's the important part, because presence isn't a technique. It's staying with the body long enough for it to realize nothing bad is happening now. And that takes time. It takes repetition. It takes living differently, not thinking differently. And this is why insight alone rarely changes behavior. Not because insight lacks truth, but because truth needs a body that can host it without bracing. Once I really understood or embodied that, something clicked. See, I stopped using insight as a measuring stick for progress. I stopped asking why I wasn't further along and started listening for when my system felt less alert for no apparent reason. Those moments were subtle, sitting in silence without scanning, pausing before responding and not filling that gap, letting a task take as long as it took without adding urgency to it. None of that felt obvious at the time. It actually felt mundane or ineffective, almost boring. But later I realized something had shifted underneath. And now when insight arrives, I don't expect it to carry authority anymore. I let it inform me, I let it point, and then I watch how my body responds over the days and weeks that follow. If behavior changes, it happens naturally. If it doesn't, I know the system hasn't received a different signal yet. There's no judgment in that anymore, just information. And I'm saying this while sitting here breathing, letting the moment stay ordinary, not trying to integrate a point, not trying to wrap this up, just noticing how change actually happens when it happens at all. Usually later, quietly, and when you're not looking directly at it. That's been my experience with insight. It's real, it's valuable, and on its own, it doesn't move much. So let me slow this down and say this as clearly as possible, because this is where I used to get lost. When I talk about changing habits, I assumed that the work happens before the habit. I thought if I were aware enough, present enough, or clear enough, I'll catch it in time and make a different choice. But that's not how it works. See, most habits don't announce themselves. The body moves first. Thought comes second. I would reach for the phone, tighten my jaw, speed up my voice, open the app, and only then did I realize what was happening. That's normal. That doesn't mean I missed my chance, because the place where habits actually change isn't before the behavior, and it isn't during it. It's after. Every habit has an ending. The phone goes down. The interaction ends. The task finishes, or the moment passes. And right there, usually for just a few seconds, the body returns to neutral. Nothing dramatic, nothing special, just a brief reset before the next thing begins. For a long time, I didn't notice that moment at all. I rushed straight past it. I would fill it with the next task, the next distraction, the next thought about what just happened. But that moment matters more than we realize. It's like the still point in breath, because the nervous system doesn't learn from intentions, it learns from how things end. If every habit ends with urgency, distraction, self-criticism, or tightening, the body learns that this pattern requires tension from start to finish. But if occasionally a habit ends and nothing bad happens afterwards, no rush, no fixing, no judgment, the body registers that as new information. And you don't have to do anything special there. You don't have to correct a habit. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to replace it with a better one. All you do is not immediately move on. You let the body settle where it naturally lands after the habit is over. You give it a few seconds to feel that nothing is required right now. And that's it. That's the part I missed. Over time, those endings start to matter. The system begins to recognize that the pattern doesn't need to be followed by urgency or tension. And slowly, quietly, the body starts organizing differently. That's when habits change. Not because I caught them earlier, not because I forced a new behavior, but because the body learned a different way to come back to itself. And once that return point shifts, the whole pattern shifts with it. That's why habit change often only makes sense in hindsight. You don't feel it happening in the moment. You just realize later on that the old response didn't show up the same way, or didn't show up at all. So if you're trying to change a habit, don't focus on stopping it midstream. Focus on how things end. That's where the system actually learns, and that's where real change begins. Thank you.